What's
Hey
up,
there.
Vaush?
I'm doing
Right?
great. How about you?
You
Yeah.
did a video on Tim Pool with the Ahmed Arbery thing.
Ought to be going to jail on murder one or at least murder two. So I feel like a lot of the hand wringing sometimes kind of lends people the impression there's more legal ambiguity than there actually is.
Well, there is. That's what I covered. The law. They're not being charged with murder one, even. They're being charged with felony murder because the assertion by the court is that the brandishing the guns would be considered a felony assault, and it's a death during the course of a felony assault. So that's a felony murder. That's why one, like, not just the shooter, but the father and then the other person are being charged with the murder because the argument is that
Because
they're all
they're complicit in what's taken place.
This is exactly what I said on my video on this topic. The shooting of Ahmed Arbery cannot be considered a normal murder. It's clearly a felony murder. I wonder if Vaush realizes that by him calling for these men to be prosecuted under the felony murder statute, he is contradicting left-wing criminal justice activism going back decades. It's almost like he has no idea that he's doing this. This is despite the fact that he constantly talks about how he's a leftist and how he has a background in criminal justice.
Common law around citizens' arrest that dates all the way back to England. And number two, people did see him going into the construction site, which is not necessarily a felony, but it is an act of a crime. So
they didn't see them go into the construction site, and the existence of common law dating back to England has nothing to do with the law in Georgia.
Of course it does. Like, what do you think our legal system is based on? It's based on English common law.
Yeah, that doesn't wait. Just because it's based on English common law doesn't mean that laws enforced by states don't take precedent over those.
No, but it's like the stand your ground thing with the Tamir Rice. Not Tamir Rice, with Trayvon Martin. Where the stand your ground law, which was not even applicable in that case, is just something that builds on a previously established precedent that is in Georgia.
Which has nothing to do with Georgia's specific legal provisions for the extent to which you're allowed to commit a citizen's arrest.
Of course it does, because the 2010 law that's under question is an extra protection on top of what citizens' arrests were already allowed. Like, it's not something that is exclusionary.
It's not a protection, it's a limitation. It's saying that you don't have a legal right to commit
protection.
Well, I actually went and looked stuff up. I found this case from the Supreme Court of Georgia, Westbury versus Clanton. According to the decision of the Supreme Court of Georgia, common law requires a warrant for the arrest of someone for a non-felony offense, except in one specific situation. That situation is when a watchman arrests a suspicious night walker. So arresting someone who could be fairly characterized as a suspicious night walker who committed a misdemeanor in your presence would be something permissible under Georgia common law. Now, I can't say that this one particular case is definitive law that absolves Ahmed Arbery shooters. What I can say is Actual Justice Warrior is entirely correct that it is not as simple as just applying Georgia's citizen arrest statute.
But the actual underlying statement I'm making is that, yeah, I think conservatives like justifying the death of black people.
I agree to disagree, but I didn't watch the Tim Pool video.
It just happens literally every fucking time a black guy dies under any circumstances.
That you were talking about.
Conservatives have no choice but to try and debunk these left-wing racism narratives because, number one, the law of truly large numbers says that the larger a given population of data, the more likely you are to find examples of outrageous things. Number two, in the United States, a country that happens to have the third largest population of any country on earth, you can find examples of any sort of aberrant behavior that you wanted. Dentists who rape people? Yes. People who have sex with their cars? Yes. Whites who kill black people under odd circumstances? Yes. This leads to number three, an endless supply of events which the news media can blow up into national news stories about race. Now, I've heard some people say that this is because the media hates whites or is anti-white. Not true at all. This phenomena has nothing to do with whites. It's actually all about blacks. Number one, The U.S. Civil Rights Act confers social power on groups that can establish themselves as oppressed minorities. Number 2. It does so by establishing a presumption of discrimination. Because U.S. employers have to prove their innocence, they respond by shifting social power to minorities. This results in PC culture, preferential hiring, and racial propaganda. Number 3. Other minorities can also seek social power under the Civil Rights Act. However, social power conferred under the Act is not uniform. The power it bestows is entirely relative to the narrative of how oppressed your particular group is when compared to others. Number 4. This oppression hierarchy is what is known as the progressive stack. The progressive stack is incredibly important to individuals and institutions that are invested heavily in identity politics. Number 5. Black leaders have fought aggressively to maintain their place at the top of the hierarchy of oppressed peoples. This is why, number 6, a Hispanic George Zimmerman or a Chinese Officer Peter Liang can easily be substituted in for whites in these particular situations. It's also why, number 7, you will never see a national news story where a Hispanic is killed by whites in a similar way to Ahmaud Arbery or any of these other Black Lives Matter stories. The mastery of blacks in accumulating social power through the Civil Rights Act is perfectly encapsulated in Hollywood. Now, there are tons of Hollywood movies about blacks, and there's also a lot of famous black Hollywood celebrities. By comparison, there are very few movies about Hispanics and almost no Hispanic Hollywood celebrities. Because the Civil Rights Act politicized race, conservatives now have to try and debunk these stories that the left tries to weaponize. It's not something that conservatives liked having to do. It's what they are forced to do given the circumstances. This is especially true given just how many of these narratives turn out to be completely false.
What about Michael Brown? I'm curious. Since we're going through all these.
Michael Brown. Oh, fuck. My memory is so many fucking black guys die unjustified deaths.
Ferguson.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Michael Brown. Oh, wait. When he charged the police cruiser, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck. I'm actually trying to remember. That was so long ago. It feels like it was ages ago. 2014. Holy fuck. That feels like a lifetime ago.
That's after Trayvon, though.
Yeah, I'd have to. Yeah. Well, Trayvon was more publicized. I'd have to go over the Michael Brown thing again. I'm pretty sure there was some fuckery there, though. I mean, cops kill so many black kids,
You know, people lost their lives due to lies that were told about Ferguson. Entire businesses were burned and looted. But nice way to weasel out, having to talk about that. False left-wing narratives have dire consequences. I mean, just look at what happened in Minneapolis yesterday.
Damn, we got
Considering the fact that black people are arrested far more disproportionately than white people for the same amount of crimes, these two stats might actually be related.
For the same amount of crimes, disproportionately how?
No. Like for weed smoking, for example, black people and white people consume weed at about the same rate, but black people get arrested 4 times as much of it.
But why?
Because black neighborhoods are over-policed. And
but
also
why?
police because of long-term racial bias? What do you mean?
Vaush gets this completely wrong. Actual justice warrior is closer to the actual truth. To understand why black people are arrested for drug offenses and pulled over more often by police, consider my experience doing police ride-alongs with rookie cops versus veteran cops. Number 1, rookie cop. Rookie cop drives around pulling over people for traffic violations. He issues a lot of citations, but doesn't arrest anyone. Because he's always available while he's out on patrol, he gets dispatched to domestic violence calls. These calls are annoying and do not usually end with an arrest. Instead, he issues misdemeanor citations. In a given week, Rookie cop makes only a few felony arrests, if even that. Number 2, veteran cop. Veteran cop has been on the force for a long time. He has been doing this so long that he can tell with decent probability which cars have contraband in them just by looking at them. Sometimes it's how the car is driving, and sometimes it's just how the car looks. As he patrols, veteran cop ignores traffic violations from cars that don't spark his interest. When I am in the car with veteran cop, he points to a car far in the distance. That one over there, he says. He then follows the car until it violates a traffic law. Half of the time veteran cop pulls a car over, there are drugs, there's an illegal weapon, or there's someone in the car who has a felony arrest warrant out for them. For the other half of the traffic stops, when there is no contraband, veteran cop usually lets drivers go with just a warning. No reason to issue some petty traffic citation when there are so many felons out and about. Veteran cop also doesn't get dispatched to annoying DV calls because he's always arresting people on felonies. If lower class blacks are the most likely to have contraband, then veteran cop is most likely to pull over cars that lower class blacks drive. This is true even though he can rarely tell the race of the driver he is pulling over before doing so. This also means that the 50% of cars he pulls over that don't end up with arrest are also disproportionately lower class blacks. This isn't an issue of over-policing, and it's not an issue of discrimination. It's an issue of efficient, skilled policing.
Now, they do catch some crimes like marijuana, which is like the one crime everybody goes to, just because they're more present in those areas. Because to catch somebody smoking marijuana, you have to see it and smoke and smell it. If you have more eyeballs and more nostrils there, then of course you're going to disproportionately get people for marijuana. But that's one crime as a consequence of a higher murder rate, of a higher assault rate. Like the crime.
Why do you think there's a higher murder and assault rate?
Why do I think that there's a higher murder and assault rate? Because,
in black communities.
Because, well, not black communities overall. There are specific black communities that have way higher murder rates.
Yeah, I agree. Why?
Because they're committing murders at higher rates.
Yeah, but why?
Well, you have fatherless households, and typically people need male role models, especially men, who are most of the people committing these crimes. And when you don't have a male role model during your peak offending years, you know, you're 15 to 24, then...
Why don't they have fathers?
Because they're not, like, getting married.
A lot of them are getting arrested? Yeah.
And now we arrive at the million-dollar question. Why is it that the black crime rate is so high in the United States? Both Vaush and Actual Justice Warrior seem to agree that the lack of fathers is the cause. Well, this is a tough question to answer, and it will take a long explanation, but let me give you my thoughts. Number 1. To start out with, we need to realize that economic incentives exist for some people to become criminals. Any human society, even exceptionally ordered ones like modern Japan, have some crime. Number 2. As Thomas Sowell points out in his book Discrimination and Disparities, ethnic groups are likely to cluster in different occupations in human societies. The idea that a society made up of various ethnic groups that come from all across the world would then evenly distribute themselves amongst all occupation groups is ridiculous. In any multi-ethnic society, it would be more realistic to expect there to be disparities between ethnic groups when it comes to crimes than to believe that there would be no disparities. Number 3. Dr. Stanton Samnow a clinical psychologist who specializes in rehabilitating criminals, concludes in his book, The Criminal Mind, that most criminals commit crime due to a narcissistic personality type. He suggests that people are born with this personality type and even describes how some criminals displayed narcissistic criminal traits as babies. Number 4. However, a solely biological explanation just wouldn't make any sense. Africa, outside certain parts of South Africa, does not have a particularly high rate of violent crime. The most violent countries in all of the world are all in Latin America. Yet Hispanic crime rates in the US are only marginally higher than those of whites, while black crime rates are significantly elevated. Number 5. Meanwhile, Jonathan Haidt describes human beings as having a first draft personality that they are born with. That personality then develops through a type of algorithmic learning. I did an entire video that is very informative on algorithmic learning. If anyone is interested in its relationship with crime, check it out. Number 6. Repeatedly taking certain addictive illegal drugs will inevitably screw up your brain learning algorithm, and it'll lead you to adopt a narcissistic personality. Number 7. Dr. Same now indicates that the narcissistic personality type of a criminal or drug addict breaks the algorithmic learning process and traps the person in an inward-focused cycle they cannot escape from. The only way to rehabilitate criminals are to open these people up with a human can opener through difficult and time-consuming cognitive-based therapy. You have to completely alter their personality. Number 8. Black victimization rates and incarceration rates began to skyrocket in comparison to whites after the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. Number 9. The shifts in social power mandated by the Civil Rights Act, alongside the oppression narrative it carries, appears to have broken black people in a variety of ways. Since the time it was passed, blacks have increasingly become victims of the criminal narcissistic personality type. Number 10. Crimes are not solely personality-based, but also the result of societal norms. Jonathan Haidt indicates that children adopt the norms of their peers and not their parents. This casts doubt on the idea, popular with conservatives, that absentee fatherism is the cause of black crime. Number 11. Black culture since civil rights has celebrated gang members and criminals. Many U.S. cities have streets named after all of the U.S. presidents. If you were to ask the average black person who Hoover Street is named after, they will most likely tell you it's named after Larry Hoover. Larry Hoover is a guy who formed the Black Disciples Gang in the late 1960s in Chicago. He is pretty much unknown to whites, but is an absolute legend to black people. Number 12. Thomas Sowell has also tackled the issue of black crime. In his book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals, Sowell indicates that after slavery, blacks adopted the societal norms of Southern whites. Number 13. At this particular period of time, most Southern whites were immigrants from the Scottish Highlands. They believed in an honor culture that required a violent response to even the most trivial sign of disrespect. They often formed clans who would sometimes go to war with each other. The Hatfield-McCoy feud was one such clan war. Obnoxious narcissistic bragging was another aspect of this type of culture. Number 14. As America became more and more educated and prosperous, Southern whites realized that their redneck culture was stupid, and so they stopped living their lives adhering to the honor culture. The Civil Rights Act, meanwhile, seems to have vindicated the idea amongst blacks that their culture was, at the very least, morally superior to whites. Therefore, honor culture, with its emphasis on violence, respect, forming clans, and narcissistically bragging, has continued to be embraced by America's blacks. Number 15. While black culture may be more at fault than absentee fatherism, the lack of black fathers just adds more chaos into what's already a complete dumpster fire.
It's just because they're being incarcerated, therefore they can't be fathers to their children. They're not already having kids outside of marriage.
I mean,
at
if
a higher
they're
rate.
in jail, no, they can't really be
All right,
fathers.
so
I mean, they can
how did they get somebody pregnant while they're in jail?
because they get someone pregnant and then they're arrested at some point during the
Arrested for
18
what?
years it takes to arrive. Anything?
Yeah, but
Smoking weed, maybe? I don't know. Four
but
times as likely as a white person.
There's not a lot of people serving long sentences or even sentences of months for marijuana in this country. You know, that's not a thing. That's not largely-
concurrently because the sentences are short, but the fact that there are so many people in there for minor drug violations at any given point in time means there was always a large number of people cycling in and out of prison.
This argument makes no sense. If the concern is absent fathers, why would anyone care that someone's dad spent a couple of days in jail on a drug offense? I understand if you aggregate the time of everyone who spent a couple of days in jail on a drug offense, that might add up to a significant amount of time. But that is completely meaningless to the issue of absentee fathers.
But like you're not serving any, like most of the time you get marijuana, you get probation. There are certain states where, you know,
That depends on your skin color sometimes.
They
a lot
have
of black folk in jail for having weed.
for possession. No, a lot of them are pled down from other crimes or possession.
Well, yeah,
is
because
attached
they get
to something
overcharged. Yeah, because they get charged for trafficking because they have like 2 dime bags on them. Yeah.
else. They're not getting charged for trafficking for 2 dime bags. There's literally weight amounts in the trafficking statutes. You
But
actually
no, that's
can't do
literally a
that.
cop tactic. You overcharge people for minor crimes so they feel they're in a position to plead down to something
But
that will
there's
save
a-
them put in jail.
This makes no sense. Does Vaush not realize that criminals are entitled to the representation of an attorney? Let's say the prosecution charges some guy with possessing crack for sale, but they have zero evidence that it was possessed for sale. The prosecutor then offers a plea deal to simple possession. The defendant may take that if he thinks it reflects his actual conduct, but he's not going to do so out of intimidation. Even if the sale charge carries a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison, his attorney is going to tell him there is no evidence of a sale. They can't convict you of that. That prison time they're holding over your head is not an actual threat. Does Vaush just assume every person acting in the criminal justice system is just entirely stupid and irrational?
Yeah, but then other people get arrested disproportionate to other racial groups.
Yeah. Do you think that police should not go to areas where there's more crime?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, because it perpetuates the cycle. Yeah, this is like socioeconomic, like consensus. Yeah.
If black people have an out of control honor culture, the dumbest possible policy response would be to stop policing them altogether. You'd basically be giving free license to gangs to go to war with each other, and for all problems to be resolved through mob violence. Is that what you want, Vaush? The return of the institution of lynching to Black America?
So if there's no crime in an area, we should have the same level of patrol as an area where there's massive amounts of crime, like open gang warfare in the streets. I'm just curious.
Yeah, because putting cops in areas with open gang warfare doesn't seem to address the long-term consequences of... First of all, there aren't very many parts of the country left that have open gang warfare. But the reason why the murder rate has gone down over the past 30 years isn't because we've been putting more police in poor areas. It's because the economy and other social factors have led to an improvement in these communities.
I mean, there's not really a strong statistical explanation for the crime drop in the 90s.
I mean, we could... we know for a fact that it's not policing.
There's a very simple explanation as to why crime dropped in the 90s. For someone who supposedly studied criminal justice, it baffles my mind that Vaush would not know about this. And I know he doesn't know about this because if he brought it up, it would actually support the point that he's trying to make. But he doesn't know, because Vaush is stupid, and he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. The reason for the drop of crime in the late 90s is because of the aging of the US population. Young people are significantly more likely to commit violent crimes than older people. What this means is less young people is always going to mean less crime. And that's why the crime rate dropped in the late 90s. The US population aged.
Also, when you talk about immigrants committing lower levels of crime, that is true overall. And for illegal immigrants, it's true. But that's because we have an insanely disproportionate amount of our crime coming from the Black community. Like, you like to group in, like, if you go by demographics, they commit more crimes than certain demographics and less crimes than others.
Yeah, so, well, that's interesting. If illegal immigrants into this country are still committing less crime than a legal demographic of our citizenry, then that's very interesting to me. There are a lot of reasons that could be explained.
No one can really reliably say that illegal immigrants commit less crimes than average Americans. If you are an illegal immigrant, you most likely interact with other illegal immigrants. If one of them commits a crime against you, are you going to report it? What if the consequences of reporting it could be that this person gets deported? How will that affect your standing in the community you're in? What if there are gang members who intentionally steal and threaten people that they know are illegal immigrants? And then they threaten those people that they will be deported if they report the crime. Because stuff like that is endemic right now in American society. Illegal immigrants buy forged documents in order to work. So just to exist in this country, they have to either hand over money to organized crime, or they have to work illegally under the table. This just puts them in another position where they can be extorted or the subject of crimes that they're unlikely to report. Bringing more and more of our economy into the shadows of the black market does not reduce crime rates. That's why merely comparing the convictions of illegal immigrants to native US-born people is not an adequate intellectual basis to reach the conclusion that illegal immigration does not cause massive amounts of crime. Anyways, I'm about half an hour in to this actual justice warrior Vaush debate. For me to have any hope of editing this video today and getting it out tonight before I go to bed, I'm gonna stop right here. We'll consider this part 1. If you would like me to continue to go through this debate and review it, let me know in the comments, and I'll consider doing a part 2, picking up where I left off. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it and you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe.